Hello, TOC Town. This is Lady Nick, and today I'm in the studio with.
Dr. Camille Renee Quinn.
Hey, Camille, it's so good to have you in the studio today. You're a part of an honorary member, I guess, of a small business owners association here, but you're more of a mental health expert, if I'm correct. Well, you know what? Let me let you go ahead and introduce yourself to our TOC Town people and Team One Blogosphere.
Absolutely. First of all, I would like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to be with you and your constituency this evening. You are correct. I am what is considered a mental health expert. I'm a licensed clinical social worker in the state of Illinois and presently have a pending application in the state of New York to also become a licensed clinical social worker here. So I have a extensive background in providing clinical therapeutic services to children, adolescents, and their families, as well as, pardon me, managing clinical and therapeutic services within programmatic nonprofit organizations, and have also done some other senior director work that kind of connects social supports for families, primarily in the city of Chicago, but also in Southern California, South Los Angeles to be specific. So currently I am residing in Rochester, New York, where I'm a National Institute of Health postdoctoral fellow in the Department of Psychiatry, which is housed in the School of Medicine at the University of Rochester Medical Center. So in my capacity, what I primarily am doing is focusing on building my research agenda, which focuses around clinical interventions, specifically those that are culturally adapted to assist children, adolescents that are affected by community violence, trauma, and excuse me, have histories of suicidal behavior, as well as their families that support them, and with a specific focus on those youth that are in fact involved in the juvenile justice system. So my goal is that interventions that I could develop would in fact curtail their future involvement in the justice system so that they can proceed, as well as their families, with having whole and healthy lives. So
Okay.
that's my goal.
That sounds like a huge mountain. I'm like ready to dive in and but
I
but
know.
but let's take the scenic route for a moment.
Sure.
For our listeners, they kind of want to know, your personal motivation and, what even got you started down this path.
Sure. My personal motivation, your listeners may or may not know how far you and I go back, but
I wasn't going to say, but I was going to let you do the honors.
sure, we connected in elementary school,
Right.
and that was many moons ago. But I will say that I think, and you would agree with me, that for the most part of all of the people that we know, we pretty much came from fairly intact families, whether we had extended families, a community of support within our neighborhood, or even within the community of our elementary school. And so that, in many ways, set me up to be fairly productive and have very extensive goals. What I have learned as a social worker throughout my career is that many people have not had those types of benefits. And not
Right.
only have they not had those sorts of benefits, whether it's social support or other forms of social capital, whether it's in their communities or elsewhere, they also experience significant challenges, difficulties, and adverse circumstances that don't necessarily allow them to be successful
Hmm.
and really live good lives. So the motivation that I have is I feel like everyone deserves that. And children, and particularly and adolescents, really should be the priority, because they're the ones that, in fact, are going to be in our position, Nicole, soon, someday soon.
Right.
And not having those advantages, I think, it keeps me up at night. So part of
Oh,
what
you
I've tried.
too? I thought I
Oh
was the
yeah.
only one.
No. It has caused several sleepless nights,
You know?
many sleepless nights. So there's a part of me as a clinician that has worked with adolescents one on one to help them kind of address and even reduce symptoms related to PTSD and trauma because of experiences that they've had in their lives, as well as thinking about a larger research foci that really could, in fact, identify ways to help large groups of adolescents who may experience some of the same circumstances and or demonstrate patterns of behavior that in fact could be addressed if they had the tools to do so.
Right,
So
you just recently received your doctorate,
yes.
and I want a lot of our listeners are more lay persons,
Mm-hmm.
laymen, so I know you hear PTSD a lot, I work with the military
Sure.
families. Break it down in simple terms, and I know it's not a one-time interview. I look forward to continuing this discussion, but for people listening to it the first time, having encountered you, let's say they don't know what they're experiencing, by the time they reach you, what kind of conversation can they have in their thoughts or with their family to sort of kind of say, you know what, we need to seek, more assistance?
Absolutely. And forgive me for using that term without
No,
actually
no, no,
defining it.
no. We need to.
Um,
I'm more of a person like we need to start talking again about mental health, especially
sure.
in our community. So you know us, we're spearheaders. If somebody's not gonna talk about it, we're gonna talk about
We're
it.
going to put it out there.
Oh,
Exactly.
yeah, exactly.
So, PTSD or post traumatic stress disorder is a very severe form and symptom. It basically encapsulates several symptoms that result from some type of traumatic exposure. And so, traumatic exposure, so for your military listeners, they're pretty clear about what that could be. It could be shell shock, it could be, being near or in a vehicle that was bombed. And months later, you're back home, you're still re-experiencing that particular episode. So, and depending on the circumstances, not everyone experiences symptoms of PTSD. Some people may have one incident that occurred at some point in their life, but there were other factors or aspects of their lives that kind of sheltered them, or as we say in the clinical world, buffered them
Mm-hmm.
from some of the severity of the symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
What typically happens, particularly with youth that are exposed to community violence on a regular basis, what I see with these individuals is they talk to me about having a reoccurring dream. And sometimes the dream could be related to an experience that they've had, whether it's having a friend or a family member that was shot and or even maybe killed, or it may be completely a reenactment of a specific situation. And so when I usually start to see individuals, or when I've seen them in the past, it's when they have tried on their own to cope. So maybe they've started to drink alcohol.
Right.
Maybe they are now smoking cigarettes or even marijuana
Mm-hmm.
because at the point that this memory or these circumstances are being triggered, they don't want to deal with that. So what they do is they look at other ways to try to distance themselves from re-experiencing or remembering or even avoidance completely of certain places, people, and things. So by the time they come to me, part of what I'm trying to do, and thankfully I've actually learned a new intervention approach, which I wish I had known many years ago when I particularly was working with women who had histories of severe and complex trauma, is that there are ways that you can kind of retrain the person in understanding some of the circumstances, some of the symptoms that they experience, and ultimately help them reprocess what happened to them in a way that they can figure out, how do I control what's happening with me right now?
We have a little bit of time. Can you share at least maybe one or two, that sort of kind of, if someone's listening, not that they're going to, I say, necessarily have the technique to apply the method, but at least, to stabilize the situation, can you give them a couple tips of, what, if this is going on, you may want to gear the conversation or the situation this way?
Sure. So one thing that often happens, particularly with really severe cases of trauma or PTSD, is people may, in fact, disassociate. And that is really scary because many times individuals are functioning, doing very well, even if they've had a really severe experience in their lives, but something, someone, some situation might occur, and they, in fact, are incapable of even processing the issue. So when the person dissociates, they pretty much just kind of detach a little bit from the interaction, the experience. So, like, we're here, we're Skyping, we're talking. Let's just say that I was a victim of trauma. You ask me a question about the traumatic experience, I just shut down.
Okay.
So as a clinician, part of what I am now going to do is, if especially if I'm face to face with a person, I'm going to look at their body composition. Has their skin color changed? Do they look flushed? Do they look shallow? Are there any kind of body movements? Because I want to make sure that I can, in fact, still try to connect with the individual. So then I might actually repeat a very benign question, like, do you know what day it is? Do you know
Mhm.
what time it is? To make sure that they're still able to engage in some way. Most times when that has happened, the person was able to do that, but there was a significant emotional response that occurred afterwards. So
It was
maybe
like a
they,
trigger.
yes,
Okay.
it was a trigger. So then they may, like, one individual I can think of actually burst into tears, and another circumstance, the person actually went into a bit of a rage where they were actually speaking to the person that actually had, in fact, harmed them.
Okay.
So, in when situations like that have happened, what I try to do or have tried to do is reconnect with them on some level, especially if it's an individual I've worked with for, have at least seen a few sessions. Thankfully, I've not had that happen early on with an individual, but I do know just from research and other clinicians that it does happen. So,
Ladies and gentlemen, we know that we just dived in deep and you probably have a lot of questions, but we're going to take a break right now and we'll be right back with part two of Chief Artisan Thursday with Dr. Camille Quinn. Hold on, we'll be right back.